In the 15th stanza of chapter 4 of the Gita, Krishna says, understanding this, the nature of right action, the wise since earliest times have acted dutifully. Be like them, acting without desire for the fruits of action. That expression, from earliest times, makes me think that in no country except India, in no religion except Hinduism, do we find this marvelous opportunity for the teachings of many, many different rishis coming in and helping people to understand these truths. Christianity has the same teaching of Sanatana Dharma, but it is limited in time. It is definitely an expression for a particular place in time. And what Jesus said has to be understood in a broader way. For example, the teaching of doomsday, he didn't teach that. But somehow from that one time, there wasn't a chance for all these saints to come along and correct it. There were many saints. But let's face it, the Catholic Church claims credit for those saints. I think they deserve credit only for this reason, that they persecuted them to the point where they became saints. But it wasn't they who made them saints, except through their persecution. It's only after their death that they finally say that he's a saint. He's no longer in danger of saying something that conflicts with their dogmas, and so they can safely declare him a saint. Well, the wonderful thing about India, again, is that they don't think in terms of saints only when they've died. They understand that a saint is a saint in his physical body, and it is not the church or a group of priests or a religion that declares people to be a saint. God is the one who makes the saints with his grace. And so what the Catholic Church does is it very much binds their religion. But the truth is that religion needs correction, and the saints could correct, but they don't, because they want to be useful to humanity. And if they say something that the church doesn't like, they know that they will be excommunicated and people will be forbidden from going to them. But for example, there was a wonderful saint in the last century called Padre Pio. He lived in southern Italy. And a friend of mine went to him for a confession. And again, I don't think that confession to a priest is a good thing. I think confession to a saint is the right thing. But a priest can do wrong. I know that the mother of a friend of mine in Yugoslavia many years ago was excommunicated for reading the newspaper. Well, what nonsense. Anyway, this friend of mine went and made his confession to Padre Pio, and during his confession, he said that he practiced Kriya Yoga and so on. Padre Pio said, shh, don't talk about these things, but you're doing the right thing. So the saints know many things, but they won't talk about them. They know about reincarnation. Some people say, well, but why haven't the saints in the Christian church talked about reincarnation if it's a fact? Well, they don't want to. Not that they're afraid of the church, but they want to live usefully, and the church would prevent them from living usefully if they taught things that were contrary to church dogma. So I really think that the days of the Catholic Church are numbered now. It's no longer possible to uphold certain truths that they don't make any sense. And there's too much evidence to disprove them. But I know, for example, Meister Eckhart, he must have been a great master. He said, I move my hand and Christ moves, who is my hand. And anyway, the church did try to excommunicate him. He managed to get out of it by dying before that notice reached him. But the doomsday teaching, for example, that everybody sort of rests moldering in his grave or wherever until finally doomsday comes, and then there's that picture of God on the altar behind the Sistine Chapel in Rome, where the damned are here. Is that right? From your viewpoint, the damned are here and the blessed are here. And the blessed look absolutely bland and uninteresting. The damned at least look a little interesting, but God is there as if hating these damned people who were who did these terrible sins. What a bleak look, what a bleak outlook. And that God should wait until doomsday, which will come God knows when. And those people who just died just before doomsday, they don't have to wait. But what about us poor people who may have to wait for thousands of years before we can finally find out what our real destiny is? It's all perfect bilge. And I know that there have been many books in recent times talking with people who, either under hypnosis or spontaneously, have actually remembered having been a certain person in a past life. They have so much endorsed reincarnation as to be able to say that they lived in a nearby village that they had never visited in this life, and they went to see those people, they recognized those people. One case, a man said, but he went to the place where he had hidden some money behind the mantelpiece of the fireplace, and sure enough it was still there. And he saw one man, he said he was murdered in his last life, and he said, "You're the one who murdered me." And I don't suppose the courts took that man to court then and condemned him, but there are many books like that. I have found them fascinating. One of them is by a man called James van Praag, with a double A as a Dutch name. And he has this, he has the ability to see people in the other world. And the thing is that they check these things out and find that what they're seeing is real. There was a Catholic nun who did this. She lived in France. And she would see people in the other world whom she didn't know on this earth. They had lived before her birth even. But she was able to, they told her their names, and she was able to find out that those persons actually did live. Another strange thing in Catholic dogma is this emphasis on sin. There was one person that this same nun saw, more than one, that were in purgatory, and one or two were in heaven, in hell, I mean. Why? Because they had disobeyed their superior. Well, for heaven's sake, disobedience may or may not be right. I'd say obey somebody who's a saint. Don't obey somebody who isn't. Don't obey somebody just because he's called your superior in a monastery. And again, don't obey if it goes against your own conscience. Nuns have been told to put their plants under in the ground upside down in order to test their obedience. That's foolish obedience. If you can't obey because it goes against your conscience, then why obey? If you can't obey that something that is against it, that is for it, why go against it and do something that's makes no sense? It's not commonsensical. Don't obey in that way. But these nuns, for one reason or another, had been condemned to hell or to purgatory. And what for? Is it that big a sin? No, it's not. But when you die thinking that it's a sin, then it may be. I remember there was a man, he was a student of my guru's. He wasn't so much a disciple as a student. But I went to his deathbed just before he died, and he was sort of tossing back and forth and saying, "I've done many wrong things in my life." And I told my guru this afterwards, and he looked sad. He shook his head. He said, "He shouldn't have said that. The thought with which you go is what determines what happens afterwards. He should have gone with more faith. How you die is very important to you." And then my guru said, "He's been coming around. I've been seeing him." So there was at least that tie that he felt with the guru. But the thing is, this doomsday, it doesn't happen just once. It doesn't happen, first of all, because God never condemns you. But certainly there is a period of self-questioning when you die. That is, as I said, your final exam. And it's not at the end of the creation of God, of everything. There's so many false dogmas in the Catholic Church. I say this somewhat courageously. I have to go to Italy and maybe somebody will shoot me. I don't know. I don't care. But the important thing is that if you love God, you will go to God. At the end of life, that thought with which you go, your final exam, you want to pass it. Obviously, you want to pass it. You want to pass it so you can move on to higher levels. And the exam will be, where do you want to go? What is your consciousness? Will you go with the thought of me? Will you go longing for the things of this world? If you long for cigarettes, remember they don't have cigarettes in the astral world. You'll have to come back here. And you can go to heaven for even hundreds and perhaps thousands of years, but if you have any material karma, it will pull you down. You will have to reincarnate. Moksha is freedom from all karma. Mukti is freedom from earthly karma in the astral world. And when you have killed you see this happens, what happens is that a desire directs energy. So when you desire anything, your heart goes out to that. The reason that you have to fulfill those desires, and there are two ways of fulfilling them. One is to, again, wisdom and action. One is to enjoy a little bit and then turn your mind toward God. And the other is to just want God. If you have a desire, offer it to God. How can you offer it? Offer the fruits of your action. You can't get rid of desires. I said to my guru one time, he said you have to get rid of all desires before you can be free from earthly incarnation. I said, even a desire for such a minor thing as an ice cream cone? Oh yes, he said. Well, that's a bit frightening. But the thing is that just as a river, if it's a strong flow, it can suck all that stuff, that the little whirlpools that form on the banks, all of that goes with that flow toward the sea. And so if your devotion is very strong, then these things get swept up into it. It's not as though you had to satisfy each desire individually. But when you love God enough, everything gets sucked into that love. So there are two ways. One is wisdom, that way of understanding that you are He. And all these other things, if you can get down to the ego, then these desires just automatically dissolve. That is wisdom. Action is the other one. Act in those ways that will free you from your past karmas. Now, you can never free yourself from billions and billions of desires. And so it does look hopeless, but it isn't. The thing is that if you get rid of the main desires, you want to free yourself enough of desires so that your energy can go toward God. I remember a couple of young men wanted to join our monastery when I was in SRF and when Master was living. And I was in charge of the monks, and I was always eager to get people to come join us. But Master didn't want them to come. And I asked him why. He said, oh, if you could see their karma. So that karma was too heavy. They had to work in the world. They had to do things to fulfill worldly desires. But the things, you don't have to fulfill all of them. You have to fulfill just enough so that you can free enough of your energy to really put energy into seeking God. You will satisfy those desires when all your energy goes toward God, and then these things get sucked into that flow. So although you have committed countless billions, trillions of acts in your life and in all your lives, you don't have to fulfill all of them, just enough to free your mind. Now, this is what karma yoga is. It helps you to do those actions which will bring you finally to that point where you can focus more one-pointedly on God. Ultimately, God is no tyrant. He won't hold himself from you. He doesn't have anger toward you. He couldn't have. You're his own child. Not only that, but let's face it, he's so weighted everything that you're almost bound to make mistakes. I mean, first of all, you get born into a womb, and you have to create that body with the mother's help, but you have to do most of it yourself through your karma. There was this one man I mentioned recently who had a club foot, and somebody said to him, why was he born with a club foot? And Master, my guru, said, because he kicked his mother in his last life. Well, all these things, the baby has to form those. He formed that club foot because that was the karma, and there was a blockage in whatever it was. Don't blame DNA. It's much deeper than that. And So, in fact, it's a very interesting thing that certain creatures that are very simple have more DNA than molecules than man. I don't know enough to really back that, but I've read it. Anyway, the thing is that as you meditate deeply, you find suddenly all these things go away. But if you have this desire, turn it toward God. Karma Yoga the purpose of Karma Yoga is to do your duty. You may have other things that you could do. For example, supposing somebody is very talented as an actor. Would it be Karma Yoga? Would it be dharmic for him to be an actor? Not necessarily. If in acting it feeds his ego and he becomes proud because everybody admires his acting ability, then it is adharmic for you to be that. It may be right as far as your skills go, but don't take your dharma as just that which gives you an ability to succeed. It may be your dharma to fail in this life. How can you tell? Well, you can't, really. I've suggested the way of that which gives you more happiness, that which gives you less happiness, but also without the guidance of a guru, I don't think anybody could ever get out of this huge hodgepodge of Maya that we're living in. But essentially what it is and what the guru will tell you to do will be those actions which will help to work out your main kinks, not all your kinks, enough of them so that you can direct your energy powerfully enough to bring all the rest into freedom. And so it is, find a guru, find his teaching, act in the right way, but wisdom and action both are very important. Joy to you.